Hello, RPS students. My name is Ms. Prest, and I'll be teaching you this week's lesson. This is Grade 7 History, Week 3, and today we'll be talking about Franklin Roosevelt's Freedom Speech, one of the most influential speeches of the 20th century. A little bit of me. I am currently the librarian at Albert Hill Middle School, and before that, I was a history teacher for 5 years, and I taught 7th and 8th grade social studies. Before we get started, you need to make sure you have two things, a pencil and a piece of paper. That's easy. And I want you to ask yourself these questions. How are you feeling mentally? Are you tired? Are you stressed? Do you need to take a few deep breaths? Please do so and pause the video if you need to. And are you in a space to be productive? Is your little brother screaming in the corner, or is your dog barking too loudly? If so, get yourself to a place where you can focus. So what we're going to start doing is we're going to be having a riddle of the week as our warm-up. I just wanted to kind of do something fun. There's going to be a new riddle every week. If you think you know the solution, I want you to email it to me with your name, and I'll give you a shout out at the beginning of next week's video. And my email address is listed below. Don't just Google the answer, though. That's boring. I will give the solution at the beginning of next week's lesson. So here's the first week's riddle. What travels the world but stays in the corner? If you want to, you can pause the video here and think about it for a little while, or you can just kind of ponder it throughout the week. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to describe the importance of Franklin Roosevelt's For Freedom speech at the time it was given, and analyze the context of the speech in order to compare it to today's society. So that sounds like a lot, but we're going to work through it together, and I promise you it's not as heavy lifting as you think it is. So here's the schedule. First, we're going to go through the words of the week. There's 3 of them. Then I'm going to give you some background information on Franklin Delano Roosevelt, from here on referred to as FDR, and the circumstances surrounding his For Freedom speech. That way you can kind of understand the speech more. Then we're going to work through a primary source analysis together. We're going to look at a video of Franklin FDR actually giving the speech. And then I'm going to talk briefly about the mission, which we will complete on Thursday. So the words of the week, and feel free to write these down if you need to, are isolationism, fascism, and peroration. That last word is a really, really, really cool one. So isolationism, the definition is the first bullet. The belief that a country should not involve itself with the affairs or problems of other countries around the world. After World War I, many people in the United States were terrified of getting involved in another global conflict that was as costly as World War I. So a lot of Americans practiced isolationism, which is, again, the belief that we as Americans specifically shouldn't deal with other countries and kind of focus on ourselves. The next word is fascism, and the definition is that first bullet. The political philosophy, movement, or regime that celebrates nation and often race above the individual, and that stands for a government headed by a dictatorial leader, severe economic and social control, and military use to crush opposition. So it is one person is usually in charge of the government, and they take away individual rights, and they use the military to kind of cement their control. So if you guys got to World War II, which I think most of you should have, I want you to think about and I want you to write down who are some fascist dictators that you learned about in your US2 classes, and pause the video now if you need to write those down. So you should have remembered Adolf Hitler was the fascist dictator and the Nazi leader of Germany. Benito Mussolini was the fascist leader of Italy. And you might have also written down Hideki Tojo or Emperor Hirohito for Japan, but we're just going to focus mainly on these 2 today. And the last word is peroration, the concluding part of a speech typically intended to inspire enthusiasm in the audience. So this is like the last really cool part of a speech that after someone gives the speech, everybody stands up and cheers. And we're specifically going to be talking about the peroration in FDR's speech. That's why I wanted to kind of point out this word. Plus, it's a really cool word. So I keep talking about this speech, so let's get into it. FDR's For Freedom speech is one of the most important speeches in history. It set the rationale for American involvement at World War II. And it lays out key values that all world governments should embrace. Specifically, it tries to break America out of this isolationist view that happened after World War I. So FDR is from a very famous political family. He was elected president for 4 terms. No one else in history had been elected to that many terms of president. And after he was elected for 4 terms, they actually amended the Constitution so that presidents could only serve 2 terms. He led America through the Great Depression and World War II. So to fully understand this speech, I want to talk a little bit about how World War II started as well, just to kind of give you a reminder. Fascist leaders taking advantage of the Depression in Europe and Asia to gain power. So remember, the Great Depression was a worldwide event where lots of people got very poor very, very quickly. And these fascist leaders like Mussolini and Hitler used people's struggles to take control and take power of these countries. They had aggressive military actions that led to war. Specifically, it started technically when Germany invaded Poland. At the time of the speech, the Nazis had already conquered Austria, Czechoslovakia, Poland, and France. The fascist Italians had invaded Ethiopia, Egypt, and Greece, and the Japanese had sacked China and Indochina. Together, Germany, Italy, and Japan, remember, make up the Axis powers. Britain was the last remaining democracy in Europe. And if you take a look at this map, the blue is controlled by the Axis, and if you look to the left, only the United Kingdom remain. Ignore the USSR part, that comes a little bit later. So we have this whole Nazi and Axis claw kind of surrounding the UK, and that was the only democracy left. So this speech that FDR gives, remembering all the state of the world that I just talked about, how America was isolationist and the Axis powers had almost conquered the entire free world. This speech took place on January 6th, 1941, less than a year before direct American involvement after the attack on Pearl Harbor, which was December 7th, 1941. So almost a year before that. The speech had an immediate goal: to rally the American people to confront a dire international emergency instigated by Axis belligerents. Belligerents is a good word that means like aggressive people. But for generations, FDR's words would inspire people around the world to think more deeply and with greater ambition about human freedom. That's why this speech is so powerful and so important. So what I want you to do now is I want you to number your paper 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I want you to skip about 1 line between each number. Go ahead and pause the video here so you can do that. What we're going to do now is we're going to watch about 2.5 minutes of Franklin Roosevelt's 4 Freedoms. What I want you to do is he is going to say each of the freedoms. As you listen, I want you to write them down. Then at the end of the video, I want you to pause the video. And I want you to think about, what do you think each of those actually means? And I want you to write that down as well. This is the actual video recording from 1941 of him giving the speech. And here we go.
The first is freedom of speech and expression everywhere in the world. The second is freedom of every person to worship God in his own way everywhere in the world. The third is freedom from want, which translated into world terms means economic understandings which will secure to every nation a healthy, peacetime life for its inhabitants everywhere in the world. The fourth is freedom from fear, which translated into world terms means a worldwide reduction of armaments to such a point and in such a far fashion that no nation will be in a position to commit an act of physical aggression against any neighbor anywhere in the world. This nation has placed its destiny in the hands and heads and hearts of its millions of free men and women. And its faith in freedom under the guidance of God. Freedom means the supremacy of human rights everywhere. Our support goes to those who struggle to gain those rights and keep them. Our strength is our unity of purpose to that high concept. There can be no end save victory.
I hope you enjoyed that, and you can go ahead and pause the video right now if you need to a couple minutes to kind of write down what you think each of those means. Okay, so first one was freedom of speech, and this is the actual quote that he said. The first is freedom of speech, expression everywhere in the world. If you remember back to sixth grade, that is also part of one of the First Amendment freedoms, and this is the freedom to say what you want to say everywhere in the world. The second was freedom of religion, and he kind of stated it as the second is freedom of every person to worship God in his own way everywhere in the world. The third was freedom from want, which translated into world terms means economic understandings which will secure to every nation a healthy peacetime life for its inhabitants everywhere in the world. And what this one kind of means is nobody is starving. Everybody has everything that they need to live a good, healthy life. And the final one is freedom from fear, which translated into world terms means a worldwide reduction of armaments to such a point and in such a thorough fashion that no nation will be in a position to commit an act of physical aggression against any neighbor anywhere in the world. And what FDR is saying here is that to reduce the amount of weapons that people have, so essentially there's no more war. So people don't have to be afraid of war anymore. So, having listened to the speech, having detected and analyzed kind of what FDR termed as those four freedoms and talked about what they mean, we're going to carry that into Thursday, where you're going to analyze some primary sources relating to this speech. Remember, primary sources are sources that come from the time period in which you're studying. So if you want to go ahead and get started with that mission, it's already up. And if not, I hope you guys have a great couple days and look forward to those the mission, which will be linked on the calendar for Thursday. See you guys.